Beneath the vast Arizona Territory sky of 1876, an Apache warrior moves like a shadow through moonlit canyons. His people know him as Silent Wind, trained in the ancient ways by medicine men who saw greatness in his spirit. Miles away, in a settler's town, a young woman faces the hangman's rope at dawn. Her crime? Healing the sick with indigenous medicine when the town doctor's treatments failed. The settlers whisper witch, but she holds her head high, knowing her only sin was mercy. As night deepens, Silent Wind reads the messages carried on the desert breeze, the same winds that taught him of honor, justice, and the true meaning of courage. Now, destiny calls him to this foreign town, where two worlds will collide in ways no one could foresee. What happens when ancient wisdom challenges the so-called civilization of the American frontier? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The leather-bound journal lay open on Sarah Mitchell's desk. Its pages filled with careful sketches of desert plants and detailed notes in her precise handwriting. She dipped her quill in ink, recording the day's events by candlelight. Outside her window, the town of Copper Creek slumbered beneath a blanket of stars, unaware of the ancient wisdom taking root in their midst. Patient responded well to the willow bark tea combined with echinacea, she wrote, her hand steady despite the weight of the day's confrontations. Fever broke by sunset. Mrs. Henderson's boy will live, though Dr. Morris claimed nothing could be done. Sarah paused, remembering the local physician's face when he'd discovered she'd defied his pronouncement of death. His eyes had hardened with something darker than professional rivalry, fear, perhaps, or hatred of what he didn't understand. She touched the dried herbs hanging from her ceiling rafters, sage, desert lavender, creosote bush. Each bundle held memories of solitary walks in the desert, where she'd first encountered the old Apache woman who would change her life. Maria, they'd called her in town, though Sarah suspected that wasn't her true name. For 3 months, they'd met in secret among the red rocks, the elderly healer teaching Sarah the medicine ways her people had known for generations. "The earth gives us what we need," Maria had said, her weathered hands gathering yellow flowers. "But you must listen with more than your ears, listen with your spirit." Sarah had listened. She'd learned to read the desert signs, to understand how each plant spoke of its purpose through its shape, its smell, its place in the landscape. Her father's medical books, inherited from his practice back east, now shared shelf space with her own observations of healing ways far older than Hippocrates. But today's success with young Thomas Henderson had come at a price. She'd seen the whispers, the crossed fingers, the mothers pulling their children to the other side of the street. 10 years as the town's midwife and unofficial healer counted for nothing against the growing tide of suspicion. The candle guttered, casting shadows on the journal's pages. Sarah added a final line. "I fear the time approaches when I must choose between silence and truth. But how can I stay silent when lives hang in the balance?" A sudden wind rattled her window, carrying with it the scent of rain and sage. Sarah closed her eyes, remembering Maria's last words before she disappeared into the desert. "When the storm comes, child, bend like the greasewood. The rigid branch breaks, but the flexible one survives." Sarah shut her journal, sliding it into its hiding place behind a loose board in the wall. Tomorrow, she would treat anyone who came to her door, as she always had. And if the storm Maria spoke of was approaching, then she would face it standing tall, knowing that every life she saved was worth whatever price she might have to pay. What she didn't know, couldn't know, was that far to the west, where the desert met the mountains, someone else was reading signs of their own. Signs that would soon intertwine their paths in ways that would shake the foundations of everything she thought she knew about healing, about courage, and about love. The medicine pouch rested against Silent Wind's chest as he knelt before the Sacred fire, its contents gathered over a lifetime of learning. Eagle feather for vision, white sage for cleansing, tobacco for prayer, and herbs whose names were spoken only in ceremony. Old Bear, his teacher since childhood, sat across from him, the firelight deepening the lines of wisdom in his face. "The spirits have shown me your path," Old Bear said in Apache, his voice carrying the weight of generations. "It leads to the white man's territory." Silent Wind remained still, letting the words settle like stones in a stream. Since his vision 3 nights ago, of a woman with healing hands and eyes that held starlight, he had known change was coming. But this was not a direction he had expected. "Our people need me here," Silent Wind replied, watching the smoke spiral upward to where ancestors dwelled among the stars. Old Bear reached into the fire with a stick, stirring the embers. "Sometimes the greatest service to our people comes from walking beyond our boundaries. The woman in your vision, she bridges 2 worlds, like you." Silent Wind touched the scars on his forearm, remembering the mountain lion that had marked him during his coming-of-age ceremony. The wounds had taught him that pain could be a teacher if one was willing to learn its lessons. "The settlers fear what they do not understand. As do we all," Old Bear said. "But you were given the name Silent Wind because you move between worlds without disturbing their surface. Like the wind that carries seeds across the desert, you will plant understanding in barren ground." From his medicine bundle, Old Bear withdrew a small object wrapped in buckskin. He passed it to Silent Wind, who unwrapped it carefully. Inside lay a crystal, clear as mountain water but with a heart of deep red. "This belonged to your grandmother," Old Bear said. "She was a bridge builder too, before the fever took her. She said it would be needed when the time was right." Silent Wind held the crystal up to the firelight. Within its depths, he saw again the woman from his vision, but this time she was weeping, her hands bound. The image filled him with an urgency. He couldn't explain. "When do I leave?" he asked, already knowing the answer. "The moon is full tonight. The owl has called 3 times. Your horse is ready." Old Bear rose, his joints crackling like the fire. "Remember, the strongest medicine comes not from herbs or ceremonies, but from the courage to heal what others would keep broken." Silent Wind stood, securing his medicine pouch and the crystal. He had learned long ago that questions were often more valuable than answers, but some paths had to be walked to be understood. The night wind carried the scent of rain from distant mountains, speaking of changes to come. As he mounted his paint horse, Old Bear pressed something else into his hand, a small bundle of dream sage, the kind used only for the most powerful ceremonies. "When the time comes," the elder said, "you will know how to use it." Silent Wind tucked the sage into his pouch and turned his horse eastward, toward lands where his people rarely ventured. Behind him, Old Bear's voice carried on the wind. "Remember who you are, Silent Wind. In your heart beats the drum of our ancestors, but in your mind lives the wisdom of tomorrow." The stars above guided his path as he rode into the night, the medicine pouch keeping time with his heartbeat. Somewhere ahead, a woman with healing hands waited, though she didn't know it yet, and with her, perhaps, lay the seeds of a future, where wisdom could flow like water between 2 worlds that had forgotten they shared the same earth, the same sky, and the same need for healing. The makeshift courthouse, normally the town hall, buzzed with whispers as Judge Harrison's gavel struck the wooden block. Sarah Mitchell stood straight back before him, her hands folded at her waist, refusing to show the fear that fluttered in her chest like a trapped bird. "Order," the judge commanded, his voice cutting through the murmurs. "We are here to determine the guilt or innocence of Sarah Mitchell, charged with practicing witchcraft and unauthorized medicine, resulting in the death of Martha Coleman." Sarah's throat tightened. Martha Coleman had been dead before they called her, the consumption too far advanced. But she'd eased the woman's passing with herbs that took away the pain, allowed her to speak final words to her children. Now, those same children sat in the courthouse, their faces torn between gratitude and fear. Dr. Morris rose to testify, his black coat pristine, his watch chain glinting in the afternoon light. As the only qualified physician in Copper Creek, I can state unequivocally that Miss Mitchell's practices are not only dangerous, but deadly. Mrs. Coleman was under my care, responding to proper medical treatment, until this woman interfered with her native potions and incantations. Sarah wanted to laugh at the absurdity. Martha had been coughing blood for weeks under Morris's proper medical treatment, but she held her peace. Her father had taught her that truth needed no defense. It simply was. Still, she couldn't help noticing how Morris avoided meeting her eyes. "Did you witness these incantations personally, Doctor?" her appointed defender, young Mr. Roberts, asked. "I didn't need to," Morris snapped. "The evidence is clear. Strange lights in her cabin at night, mysterious meetings with savages in the desert, herbs and bones hanging from her rafters like some pagan temple, and now a dead woman." The crowd rustled. Sarah saw Mrs. Henderson clutch her son, the boy she'd saved just days ago, closer to her chest. The woman's eyes met Sarah's briefly before darting away. "I call Rachel Turner to the stand," Morris announced. Sarah's heart sank as her former friend approached the witness box. Rachel had been there the night Martha died, had helped Sarah tend to her, but fear could make betrayers of anyone. "Tell us what you saw, Mrs. Turner," Morris prompted. Rachel twisted her apron in her hands. She was speaking in a strange tongue, had these bundles of leaves burning. "Martha's fever got worse after that, and then—" She paused, glancing at Sarah with something like regret. Then she passed. "The fever always spikes before death with consumption," Sarah spoke up, unable to stay silent. "It's the body's final fight." The sage was to ease her breathing, nothing more. "Silence." Judge Harrison's gavel cracked against the block. "You will speak only when questioned, Miss Mitchell." The trial continued through the afternoon. Every healing she'd performed, every life she'd saved, was twisted into something dark and dangerous. Even Thomas Henderson's miraculous recovery was presented as evidence of her unnatural powers. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows through the courthouse windows, Judge Harrison cleared his throat. "Having heard the evidence, I am prepared to render judgment." Sarah lifted her chin, meeting his gaze. In his eyes, she saw not hatred but something worse, the cold certainty of a man who believed he was doing right. "Sarah Mitchell, you have been found guilty of practicing witchcraft and causing the death of Martha Coleman through unauthorized medicine. The penalty for such crimes is death by hanging, to be carried out at dawn 2 days hence." The courthouse erupted in chaos. Some cheered, others wept. Through it all, Sarah stood unmoved, even as the sheriff approached with manacles. "Miss Mitchell," Judge Harrison spoke again, almost gently now, "if you renounce your practices and swear never to heal again, the court might show mercy." Sarah thought of Maria's teachings, of the lives she'd saved, of the ancient wisdom that flowed through her hands. She thought of Martha Coleman's peaceful passing, surrounded by family instead of dying alone in agony. "I cannot renounce what is true," she said clearly, her voice carrying to every corner of the room. "I am a healer. That is not a crime, but a calling. If you hang me for easing suffering and saving lives, then let history judge who the true criminals are." A gasp rippled through the courthouse. The judge's face hardened, and he struck his gavel one final time. "Take her to the jail." As they led her away, Sarah caught a glimpse of something through the courthouse window, a red-tailed hawk circling against the darkening sky. Maria had taught her that hawks were messengers, carrying prayers to the spirits. She offered up her own prayer then, not for rescue but for understanding, for a bridge between her world of healing and theirs of fear. She couldn't know that far away, under the same darkening sky, a man with a medicine pouch was already reading the signs that would lead him to her. Couldn't know that her prayer was already being answered in ways she could never have imagined. Moonlight filtered through the iron bars of Sarah's jail cell, casting silver patterns on the rough wooden floor. She sat on her narrow cot, fingers tracing the smooth surface of her grandmother's moonstone pendant, the only possession they'd allowed her to keep. Outside, a coyote's lonely call echoed through the desert night. The pendant caught the moonlight, seeming to glow from within. Her grandmother had given it to her on her deathbed, whispering, "Some things are older than the laws of men, Sarah. Remember that when the night seems darkest." At the time, she hadn't understood. Now, facing her own dawn appointment with death, the words carried new meaning. Sheriff Wilson's boots scraped against the wooden floor as he made his rounds. He paused at her cell, lantern light flickering across his weathered face. "Preacher's outside, Miss Sarah. Says he'll hear your confession if you're willing." Sarah met his eyes. In them she saw not judgment, but something closer to regret. "Thank you, Thomas, but I have nothing to confess. You were there when I delivered your daughter's baby last spring. Was that witchcraft?" The sheriff looked away. "That was different, but these rumors about you meeting with savages, learning their ways. Folks are scared, Sarah. Scared of what they don't understand. Understanding comes from listening, not from fear," she said softly, remembering Maria's words. "Your daughter and her child lived because I combined my father's medical knowledge with medicines as old as these mountains. How can that be evil?" He didn't answer, just moved on, his footsteps fading into the night. Sarah closed her eyes, letting her thoughts drift to the desert beyond the town's boundaries. She could almost smell the sage and creosote, feel the wind's caress on her skin. In her mind, she walked among the red rocks where Maria had taught her, gathering strength from the memory. A flutter of wings drew her attention to the window. An owl perched on the sill, its eyes gleaming like amber in the darkness. Sarah held her breath. Owls were rare in town. Maria had taught her they were messengers, carriers of dreams and portents. The owl hooted once, soft and low, then launched itself into the night. As it disappeared, Sarah felt a strange stirring in the air, like the moment before a storm breaks. Her pendant grew warm against her skin, and for an instant she thought she saw shapes in the moonlight, a rider moving through desert canyons, guided by starlight and ancient wisdom. The vision faded, but the warmth remained. Sarah lay back on her cot, still clutching the pendant. The night wind whispered through the bars, carrying the scent of sage and something else, promise perhaps, or destiny. Miles away, Silent Wind dismounted in a sheltered canyon, reading signs invisible to other eyes. The crystal from Old Bear pulsed with a faint light, growing warmer as he faced eastward toward the settler's town. His medicine pouch seemed to whisper with the voices of ancestors, guiding him forward. He had traveled through the night, moving like his namesake through shadow and starlight. Now, as he studied the town's distant lights, he felt the rightness of his path settle into his bones. The woman's spirit called to him like a song carried on the wind, a melody of healing and hope. The moon sailed high above, casting enough light to travel by. Silent Wind checked his weapons, not for killing, but for the protection they might need. Then he remounted, guiding his horse down paths that would keep them hidden from watching eyes. In her cell, Sarah drifted between waking and dreams, the moonstone pendant glowing softly against her heart. Neither she nor her unseen defender could know how their paths would cross, or how their meeting would change, not just their lives, but the very fabric of understanding between their peoples. The night deepened toward dawn, pregnant with possibilities. And in the spaces between moonlight and shadow, between civilization and wilderness, between fear and understanding, destiny wove its unseen web. Dawn approached like a grey whisper across the desert sky. The gallows stood ready in the town square, its fresh-cut pine boards stark against the fading stars. A length of rope swayed gently in the pre-dawn breeze, casting a serpentine shadow on the ground below. Sheriff Wilson adjusted his gun belt, squinting at the eastern horizon. Something felt wrong about this morning, though he couldn't say what. Maybe it was the unusual quiet. No birds singing, no coyotes calling their last night's songs. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. Time. "To get the prisoner," Deputy Rogers said, jingling his keys. Sarah heard them coming. She stood calmly in her cell, the moonstone pendant cool against her skin. She had not slept, but neither had she wept. Instead, she'd spent the night remembering every healing, every life touched, every moment of learning from both her fathers. Books and Maria's wisdom. If these were to be her last hours, she would face them knowing her life had served a purpose. The first rays of sunlight were just touching the tops of the buildings when they led her out. A small crowd had gathered, some faces showing sorrow, others triumph, most simply the blank mask of those who believed justice was being served. Dr. Morris stood at the front, his watch chain glinting. "A shame it had to end this way, Miss Mitchell," he said, but his eyes showed no regret. They led her up the gallows steps. The rough wood caught at her skirts, and Sarah noticed absently that someone had taken the time to sweep the platform clean. Such strange courtesies humans offered to those they were about to kill. The sheriff began reading the formal charges, his voice carrying across the square. But Sarah's attention was drawn to something else, a subtle change in the air, a shift in the quality of silence. The pendant at her throat grew suddenly warm. The first arrow struck the rope above her head, severing it cleanly. The second pinned the sheriff's coat to the gallows post, missing his flesh by a hair's breadth. The third thudded into the platform between her feet, and she saw it carried a message, a single eagle feather tied to its shaft. Chaos erupted. Women screamed, men shouted, guns were drawn. But through it all, Sarah stood motionless, watching as a rider emerged from the shadows between buildings. He sat his paint horse like he was born to it, bow still drawn, his presence commanding attention even in silence. "The savage!" someone shouted. "Shoot him!" But before anyone could take aim, Silent Wind had somehow materialized beside her on the platform. His movement was so fluid, so natural, that for a moment Sarah wondered if he was real, or a spirit conjured by her desperate prayers. His eyes met hers, deep, ancient eyes that held wisdom and something else she couldn't name. He spoke a single word in Apache, then switched to careful English. "Choose quickly." "Life or death?" Sarah didn't hesitate. "Life." In one motion he swept her onto his horse. The sheriff, finally freeing himself from the pinned coat, raised his gun. "Stop! In the name of—" But Silent Wind had already wheeled his horse, and they were galloping down the street. Bullets whizzed past them, kicking up dust. Sarah clung to her rescuer's waist, heart pounding with a wild mixture of terror and exhilaration. They rode straight for the open desert, the morning sun at their backs. Behind them, she could hear horses being mounted, men shouting orders. The posse would follow, she knew. This was only the beginning. Silent Wind guided his horse with subtle shifts of weight, taking paths that seemed to disappear as soon as they passed. The pendant bounced against Sarah's chest, and she felt a strange resonance, as if it were responding to something her rescuer carried. When they reached the shelter of a small canyon, he finally spoke again. "You are the one who learns healing from both worlds." "Yes," Sarah answered, surprised by the question. "How did you—" "The spirits led me. Old Bear saw you in a vision." He touched something beneath his shirt, a medicine pouch, she realized. "Your town fears what they do not understand. But fear cannot stop the mixing of waters when the rivers are meant to join." More shouts echoed from behind them. Silent Wind urged his horse forward again, deeper into the maze of canyons. Sarah looked back once at the dust rising from their pursuers' horses, then turned to face forward. She had chosen life, not just survival, but a life that might build bridges between worlds. The piece of rope that had been meant to end her life now trailed from her wrist where they'd failed to remove it in the chaos. Silent Wind saw it and drew his knife. With a quick motion, he cut her bonds, but caught the rope before it could fall. "Keep it," he said, pressing it into her hands. "To remember that death is not always what it seems. Sometimes it is just a door to a new path." Sarah nodded, tucking the rope fragment into her pocket as they rode on into the heart of the desert, toward a future neither of them could have imagined at yesterday's sunset. The sun climbed higher as Silent Wind guided his horse through a maze of narrow canyons. In his hands, he held an intricately marked map of the territory, its surface worn smooth with age and use. Sacred places were marked with symbols only medicine men could read. safe havens, healing springs, caves where the ancestors still whispered their wisdom. Sarah studied their path, memorizing each turn. The desert was different here than in the areas where Maria had taught her, more dramatic, with towering red cliffs that seemed to touch the sky. The air smelled of sun-warmed stone and wild sage. "They will follow our tracks," she said, breaking the silence that had stretched between them. Silent Wind nodded. "For a time, but soon the wind will rise, and the desert will keep our secrets." He pointed to gathering clouds in the west. "The spirits prepare a storm." As if in answer, a hot wind gusted through the canyon, carrying the first hints of rain. Sarah's skirts whipped around her legs, and she felt the moonstone pendant grow, warm against her skin. Ahead, the canyon split into 3 paths. Silent Wind drew the horse to a halt, studying the map. In the distance, they could hear the faint sound of pursuit. He touched a symbol on the weathered surface, a spiral surrounded by dots. "There is a place, sacred to my people. The settlers cannot follow us there." "Why not?" "They believe it is cursed. Many have tried to enter its canyons. None returned." He looked at her carefully. "But you understand the old ways. You will see what they cannot." Sarah remembered Maria's teachings about sacred places, how they revealed themselves only to those who approached with respect and understanding. "I trust you," she said simply. He nodded once, then guided them down the leftmost path. The canyon walls grew narrower, darker, until they were riding through shadows despite the morning sun. The air grew cooler, and Sarah caught glimpses of ancient pictographs on the walls, handprints, spirals, figures that seemed to dance in the shifting light. The sound of hoofbeats echoed behind them, closer now. Silent Wind pressed something into her hands, a small pouch of herbs. "Crush these if they come too near. The scent will confuse their horses." Sarah recognized some of the herbs from Maria's teachings: desert sage, creosote, something else she couldn't name. She tied the pouch to her belt, next to the fragment of rope that had nearly ended her life. They emerged from the narrow canyon into a hidden valley. A spring bubbled up from between red rocks, surrounded by unexpectedly lush vegetation. Above them, the storm clouds gathered strength, and thunder rolled across the sky like distant drums. "We rest the horse here," Silent Wind said, dismounting. He helped her down, his touch respectful but brief. "The way ahead is harder. We must go on foot through passages only the wind knows." Sarah knelt by the spring, cupping her hands to drink. The water tasted of minerals and earth, alive with the desert's essence. When she looked up, Silent Wind was scanning the cliff walls, reading signs invisible to other eyes. The sounds of pursuit had faded, but both knew they couldn't rest long. Silent Wind spread the map on a flat rock, tracing their path with a finger. "Beyond these cliffs lies the place of my people. But first we must cross the Shadow Canyon." "Why is it called that?" "Because it is where the world of spirits touches our own. Those who enter with fear in their hearts become lost forever." He studied her face. "You are not afraid." Sarah thought of the gallows, of the faces in the crowd, of all she had left behind. "Fear serves no purpose now. I chose life, whatever form it takes." Thunder cracked overhead, closer now, and the first heavy drops of rain began to fall. Silent Wind quickly rolled the map, securing it in his medicine pouch. "The storm is our ally. It will wash away our tracks and blind those who follow." As they prepared to move on, Sarah saw movement in the shadows of the cliffs. A figure seemed to watch them, an old woman with long silver hair. When she blinked, the figure was gone. But the scent of sage grew stronger. "Maria," she whispered. Silent Wind touched her arm lightly. "The ancestors walk with us. They approve of your path." The rain fell harder as they left the spring, heading toward a nearly invisible crack in the cliff face. Behind them, lightning illuminated the valley, and for a moment Sarah saw their shadows cast huge against the red rock walls. Not two separate shapes, but one form, neither fully Apache nor fully white, something new emerging from the union of two worlds. She followed Silent Wind into the narrow passage, leaving behind not just her pursuers, but the rigid boundaries that had defined her world. Ahead lay uncertainty, danger, and the promise of a truth larger than the small fears of small minds. The cave they sheltered in was small but dry, its entrance hidden behind a curtain of rain-soaked vines. Silent Wind built a fire so small it seemed barely more than a candle flame, yet it cast enough warmth to keep the mountain chill at bay. Between them sat a worn water skin, its surface decorated with symbols Sarah recognized from Maria's teachings. "You must drink," Silent Wind said, offering her the water skin. "The desert takes life quickly from those who forget." Sarah accepted, noting how he had drunk. Second, a gesture of trust that spoke louder than words. The water tasted of leather and minerals, carrying the essence of the hidden springs they had passed. "Your name," she said carefully, "Silent Wind. What does it mean in your language?" She spoke the Apache words Maria had taught her, crude but sincere. His eyes widened slightly at her use of his tongue. "You speak the old words." "Only a few. Maria, the elder who taught me healing. She shared what she could in the time we had." Silent Wind nodded slowly. "My name, it was given when I was young. The elders saw that I could move without disturbing even the morning dew, but more than that, they saw I could walk between worlds, the seen and unseen, the old ways and the new, without breaking the balance of either." A comfortable silence fell between them, broken only by the soft crackle of their tiny fire. Outside, the storm continued its cleansing work, erasing their tracks and keeping their pursuers at bay. "Why did you save me?" Sarah finally asked, the question that had burned in her mind since the gallows. Silent Wind reached into his medicine pouch, withdrawing the crystal she had glimpsed earlier. In the firelight, it seemed to hold its own inner flame. "The ancestors spoke of you in visions." Old Bear saw a healer who bridged two worlds, like water flowing between two cups. "But more than this," he paused, choosing his words carefully. "I saw the truth of your heart. You heal not for power or pride, but because it is the song your spirit sings." Sarah touched her grandmother's pendant, feeling its familiar warmth. "Your people won't welcome me," she said softly, "just as my people feared your ways. Some will fear. Others will remember that all medicine comes from the same source, whether it flows through white hands or Apache ones." He offered her a strip of dried meat from his provisions. The human heart knows truth when it tastes it. As they shared the simple meal, Sarah found herself speaking of her father, of his medical books and gentle hands, of how he had taught her that healing was a sacred trust. Silent Wind listened, offering his own stories of learning from Old Bear, of vision quests and ceremonies that opened the eyes of the spirit. When Sarah began to shiver despite the fire, Silent Wind unwrapped a blanket from his few possessions. The gesture was practical, yet in its simplicity lay a deeper meaning. Trust given and received, boundaries respected even as they dissolved. "Tomorrow," he said, "we cross the most dangerous part of our journey. You should rest." Sarah nodded, wrapping herself in the blanket that smelled of horses and desert sage. As she drifted towards sleep, she heard Silent Wind singing softly, a healing song, she realized, though different from those Maria had taught her. Yet somehow she understood its essence, its prayer for protection and guidance. The last thing she saw before sleep took her was Silent Wind's profile against the cave wall, steady and watchful, his medicine pouch glowing faintly with the same inner light as her grandmother's pendant. Two traditions, two paths of healing, beginning to weave together like strands of a stronger rope than the one that had nearly taken her life. Dawn painted the canyon walls in shades of amber and rose as Sarah and Silent Wind made their way along a narrow trail. They had left the cave before first light, but already the sun promised another scorching day. Between them, they carried a freshly gathered bundle of healing herbs, their fragrant essence rising in the morning warmth. The sound stopped them both, a weak cry, barely audible over the wind's whisper through the rocks. Silent Wind held up his hand, head tilted, listening. The cry came again, from a crevice just off the trail. They found the young eagle wedged in a narrow gap between boulders, one wing twisted at an awkward angle. Its fierce eyes showed no fear, only pain and defiance. A sign. Silent Wind said softly, "The eagle is a messenger of the sky spirits." Sarah knelt carefully, her healer's eyes assessing the damage. "The wing isn't broken, just dislocated. If we work together," Silent Wind nodded, already reaching for his medicine pouch. "I will sing the healing songs. You use your knowledge." Of bones, they worked in harmony, each bringing their own medicine to the task. Silent Wind's voice rose in ancient chants, while his hands burned sacred herbs, the smoke curling around them like protective spirits. Sarah gently manipulated the joint, drawing on her father's teachings about anatomy and her own experience setting broken wings. The eagle remained eerily still, as if understanding their intent. When the wing finally slipped back into place with a soft click, the great bird shuddered once, then grew calm. "Now," Silent Wind said, "we seal the healing with both medicines." He withdrew a small pot of salve from his pouch, a mixture Sarah recognized from Maria's teachings, but with subtle differences. "May I?" she asked, reaching for her own herb bundle. She selected 3 plants, witch hazel for swelling, yarrow for healing, and sage for blessing. Silent Wind watched as she crushed them together, adding them to his salve. "Your ways and ours," he said, "like streams joining to form a stronger river." Together they applied the medicine, their hands working in unconscious synchronization. The eagle's eyes slowly closed, accepting their touch with unusual trust. "My father would have used laudanum and splints," Sarah mused. "It would have worked, but the eagle's spirit would have slept," Silent Wind finished. "Sometimes the body must stay awake to remember its own healing." They sat back, watching as the eagle tested its wing with small movements. The morning sun had climbed higher, turning the canyon into a forge of light and heat. "Maria tried to teach me this," Sarah said softly, "that healing isn't just about mending bodies. It's about understanding the spirit that lives in all things." Silent Wind gathered their medicines, carefully rewrapping each bundle. "And your father's teachings, were they only about the body?" Sarah smiled, remembering. "No. He used to say that half of healing was giving people hope, helping them believe in their own recovery." "Then perhaps your father knew more of our ways than he realized." Silent Wind offered her the water skin. "All true healing comes from the same source, whether we call it God, or the Great Spirit, or simply the wisdom of the earth." The eagle stirred, spreading its wing to its full span. The movement was cautious but strong. Soon it would fly again. "In my town," Sarah said, "they would have said this was witchcraft, healing with songs and smoke instead of proper medicine. And my people once said that white man's medicine was evil because it came from books instead of visions." Silent Wind's voice held a gentle irony. "Fear makes us blind to the truth that healing has many paths." The eagle launched itself suddenly, powerful wings catching the updraft. They watched it soar against the blue sky, its flight strong and sure, as if it had never been injured. "We should go," Silent Wind said, but his voice was pleased. "The eagle's recovery is a good sign. The spirits approve of our joined medicine." As they continued their journey, Sarah felt something shift inside her, a deeper understanding of what Maria had tried to teach her. It wasn't about choosing between 2 ways of healing, but about seeing how they could flow together, like tributary streams joining to form a mighty river. The morning sun blessed their path with light, and somewhere above, an eagle wheeled in the endless sky, carrying their combined healing into the world like a promise of things to come. Sarah's father's pocket watch lay broken in her palm, its gold case dented, glass face cracked. She had found it in her skirt pocket, forgotten until now. The hands had stopped at dawn, the exact moment she should have died. "They're getting closer," Silent Wind said, crouching beside her at the canyon's edge. Below, dust clouds marked their pursuers' approach. Not just the sheriff's posse now, but what looked like army scouts as well. Sarah tucked the broken watch back into her pocket. "How many?" 12 riders. 2 Apache trackers with them. His face hardened slightly. Men who have forgotten their own ways. The sound of distant hoofbeats echoed off the canyon walls. They had been moving steadily higher into the mountains, but the army scouts were skilled at following even the faintest trails. "They'll separate soon," Silent Wind continued, reading the land like a book. "The army scouts will take the high path, thinking to cut us off at Thunder Pass. The sheriff's men will follow our trail." Sarah touched her grandmother's pendant, which had grown unexpectedly cool. "And the Apache trackers? They will know. We're heading for the sacred places." He checked his remaining arrows. "But they fear to follow us there." A shot rang out, the bullet sparking off rock far below them. Silent Wind pulled Sarah deeper into the shelter of an overhanging cliff. The morning sun had become their enemy, silhouetting them against the sky. "We cannot stay here," he said, reaching into his medicine pouch. He withdrew a small bundle of herbs Sarah didn't recognize. "The spirits of this place will help us, but we must ask properly," he began, to chant softly, crushing the herbs between his palms. The scent that rose was unlike anything Sarah had encountered, sharp and sweet at once, like lightning striking sage. Her head swam slightly, and the air seemed to thicken. "Look there." Silent Wind pointed to a narrow crack in the cliff face. "The way was hidden before. Now it opens." Sarah blinked. Where there had been solid rock, a passage now seemed to beckon. Or had it been there all along, and she simply hadn't seen it? More shots echoed through the canyon. The pursuers were splitting up, just as Silent Wind had predicted. They could hear orders being shouted, horses whinnying in protest at the steep terrain. "Trust the medicine," Silent Wind said, taking her hand. "The passage is real, but only for those who believe." They slipped into the narrow crack, just as riders appeared on the trail below. Sarah heard the sheriff's voice. "They have to be here. Somewhere. These cliffs are too steep to climb." The passage was dark and tight, forcing them to move sideways. Sarah's skirts caught on rough stone, and she felt the broken watch press against her hip. Time seemed to move strangely here, like water flowing uphill. They emerged onto a hidden ledge, concealed from below by a curtain of hanging vines. Silent Wind quickly covered their tracks. Using techniques Sarah half remembered from Maria's teachings. "Rest," he said, offering her the water skin. "The army scouts will waste many hours searching Thunder Pass, and the sheriff's men will find only circles in their trail." Sarah drank deeply, then gestured to his medicine pouch. "Those herbs, the ones that showed us the way, I've never seen their like. They grow only in places where the spirit world draws close to ours. Old Bear gave them to me for this journey." He smiled slightly. "He said I would need medicine for opening hidden paths." More voices drifted up from below, frustrated now. The searchers were losing their trail, their confidence wavering in this harsh and unfamiliar terrain. Sarah withdrew the broken watch, studying its cracked face in the filtered sunlight. "Time moves differently here, doesn't it? In the sacred places, time is like a river with many branches. We have stepped into a different channel." He touched the watch gently. "Perhaps it stopped to show you that your old life ended at dawn, making room for a new one to begin." The voices below grew fainter as the searchers moved on. Soon they would find the false trail Silent Wind had left, leading them far from this hidden sanctuary. Sarah offered Silent Wind the water skin, completing their circle of trust. Above them, an eagle circled, perhaps the same one they had healed, keeping watch over their progress toward a future that seemed to shift and change like the desert itself. Dusk painted the mountains in deep purple as Sarah and Silent Wind approached the Apache camp. Smoke from cooking fires rose in thin columns against the darkening sky, carrying the scent of pine and roasting meat. A ceremonial blanket, woven in patterns of red and black, hung outside the medicine lodge. A warning or a welcome, Sarah wasn't sure which. Children spotted them first, their play stopping mid-motion as they stared at the white woman in torn dress and tangled hair. Their shouts brought others, warriors with suspicious eyes, women gathering their little ones close, elders emerging from their lodges to witness this unprecedented arrival. Old Bear stood waiting, his lined face unreadable as stone. The crystal he had given Silent Wind glowed visibly now through the medicine pouch, matching the faint luminescence of Sarah's.
Pendant.
Silent Wind dismounted first, helping Sarah down with careful dignity. He spoke rapidly in Apache, explaining their journey, while Sarah stood straight-backed despite her exhaustion. She recognized fragments of his words from Maria's teachings, enough to know he spoke of visions, healing, and the joining of paths. Old Bear approached slowly, studying Sarah with eyes that seemed to see beneath her skin. "You learned from Maria," he said in careful English. "She was my sister." Sarah's heart jumped. "She never told me. There was much she could not tell." "You," he switched to Apache, speaking to Silent Wind. "The council must meet. This is unprecedented." Warriors appeared at the edge of the firelight, their faces painted for discussion of serious matters. Women gathered too, their whispers a steady undercurrent of concern and curiosity. A young woman stepped forward, offering Sarah a clay cup of water. The gesture was small but significant, hospitality offered before the council's decision. Sarah accepted with both hands, as Maria had taught her. Old Bear led them to the council fire, where other elders had gathered. An ancient woman with silver hair gasped when she saw Sarah's pendant. "Where did you get this?" she demanded in Apache. "My grandmother's gift," Sarah replied in the same tongue, her accent careful but clear. "She said it was older than memory." The old woman's eyes widened. She spoke rapidly to Old Bear, who nodded slowly. "Many threads come together here," he said. "The pendant you wear, it was made by our people long ago, given to a white medicine woman who helped our tribe survive the fever times. Your grandmother." "My grandmother's grandmother," Sarah said, understanding blooming like dawn. "She never spoke of its origin." Silent Wind placed his medicine pouch beside the pendant. The crystal within pulsed in harmony with the moonstone, casting shifting patterns on the gathered faces. An elder spoke harshly from the shadows. "She is still white. Her people hunt us like animals." "She was hunted too," Silent Wind answered, "for healing, for walking between worlds as I do." Old Bear raised his hands for silence. "The signs are clear. The crystal speaks to her pendant. The eagle they healed together watches our camp. Even the storm that covered their escape was foretold." He switched to English. "But you must understand, daughter of two paths, acceptance will not come easily. There are wounds older than your pendant." Sarah straightened. "I know healing takes time, and trust must be earned. I ask only for the chance to learn, to share what I know, and to prove that wisdom knows no color." The ancient woman with silver hair stood suddenly, her voice ringing with authority. She pulled a ceremonial blanket from her shoulders, red and black and white, woven in patterns Sarah recognized from Maria's teachings. With formal gravity, she draped it around Sarah's shoulders. "The pattern speaks of bridges," the old woman said in Apache, "of paths joining. I've kept it 40 years waiting for this sign." She turned to the council. "Who are we to question what the spirits have clearly joined?" Silence fell around the fire. Then Old Bear nodded once, with finality. "So be it. She will stay. She will learn our ways, as Silent Wind learns hers. Together they will forge a new medicine, stronger than either alone." The tension broke like a fever. Children crept closer, touching Sarah's torn skirts with wondering fingers. Women approached with food and offers of clean clothing. The warriors remained watchful, but their hostility had turned to cautious curiosity. Silent Wind touched Sarah's arm gently. "Welcome," he said softly, "to your new path." Under the stars, the council fire burned bright, its smoke carrying prayers and possibilities into the vast desert night. Sarah knelt beside her partially burned medicine book, salvaging what pages she could. The book had been found by a young Apache scout who discovered it discarded near the town's militia camp. Its leather cover was scorched, many pages reduced to ash, but some of her careful drawings and notes remained, a bridge between her. Old life and new, they're moving deeper into our territory, Silent Wind said, entering the medicine lodge where Sarah had spent the past week learning from Old Bear. The army scouts lead them now, 20 men, well armed. Old Bear looked up from the herbs he was sorting. "They do not seek just you anymore," he told Sarah. "They use you as an excuse to push into our hunting grounds." Sarah traced her fingers over a surviving page, her notes on using willow bark, alongside Maria's teachings about pain-easing ceremonies. "Dr. Morris will have convinced them. I'm either a witch or your prisoner." He never could accept that there might be medicine beyond his understanding. A commotion outside drew their attention. Two young warriors rushed into the lodge, speaking rapidly in Apache. Silent Wind's face hardened as he listened. "They found our western hunting camp," he translated for Sarah. "Burned it. Left a message written in Apache. They want us to surrender you, or they'll keep coming." Old Bear rose, his movement fluid despite his age. "They believe we force you to stay, that we bewitched you." He laughed, but there was no humor in it. "They cannot imagine that wisdom flows both ways." Sarah stood, clutching her damaged book. "I should go back, explain." "No." Silent Wind's voice was firm. "They would hang you still and use your death to justify taking our land." He touched the medicine pouch at his chest. "There is another way." Old Bear nodded slowly. "The crystal shows you something. A way to protect both our people and our knowledge, but it will require trust from everyone." Outside, the camp was stirring like a disturbed anthill. Warriors painted themselves for scouting, women packed essential items in case they needed to move quickly, children were gathered into the central lodges. Sarah saw her two worlds colliding, threatening to destroy each other. A young Apache mother approached, carrying a feverish child. Despite the crisis, she looked to Sarah with trust born of the past week's shared healing work. Sarah handed her burned book to Silent Wind and took the child in her arms, feeling the heat of infection. "Bring me the white willow bark," she said. In Apache, and the sacred blue sage Old Bear showed me. As she worked, combining her father's knowledge of fever with Apache healing songs, she felt the tension in the lodge shift. This was what they were really fighting for, not land or pride, but the power to heal, to protect, to nurture. Silent Wind watched her work, then turned to Old Bear. "The town fears her power because they don't understand it. But what if we showed them?" The old medicine man's eyes narrowed. "Showed them what?" "That her healing comes from knowledge, not witchcraft. That our medicine and hers are two paths to the same truth." Silent Wind spread Sarah's burned book on a woven blanket. "These drawings, they're like the teaching marks we make on cliff walls. A way to pass wisdom forward." Sarah looked up from her patient, understanding dawning. A demonstration of combined healing, not just for the tribe, but for the town too. Old Bear was silent for a long moment, listening to something only he could hear. Finally he reached for his own medicine pouch. "It is dangerous. The wrong word, the wrong gesture, and blood will flow." "Blood flows already," Silent Wind said quietly. "But Sarah and I have learned that when two medicines work together, the healing is stronger than either alone." The feverish child stirred, his temperature already dropping under the combined treatments. His mother touched Sarah's hand in gratitude, then Silent Wind's, acknowledging them both as healers. "It must be your choice," Old Bear told Sarah. "Your people may see it as betrayal." Sarah thought of Dr. Morris's rigid certainty, of the town's fear of anything different. She thought of Maria, teaching her in secret, building a bridge between worlds one herb at a time. "No," she said firmly, "the real betrayal would be to let fear destroy wisdom that could save lives." She stood, still holding the sleeping child. "If we don't find a way to share our knowledge, to show that healing knows no boundaries, then both our peoples lose something precious." Silent Wind touched the crystal through his medicine pouch. "Then we must prepare. The town's hunters come. With guns and anger, we must meet them with something stronger." "Hope," Sarah said, laying the child in his mother's arms. "We must meet them with hope." In the quiet hour before dawn, Sarah sat beside the medicine lodge, stringing beads on a leather cord. Her fingers, once skilled only with surgical thread and bandages, now moved surely through the intricate patterns Maria had taught her. White shell beads alternated with darker ones of polished Apache turquoise, a bridge between worlds, like everything else in her new life. Silent Wind found her there, as she had known he would. Each morning for the past weeks, they had shared this time, speaking of healing and herbs, of dreams and duties. But today felt different. The air between them hummed with unspoken words. He sat beside her, offering a cup of morning tea steeped with herbs for clarity. "Your beadwork improves," he said softly. "The pattern speaks true." Sarah touched the completed section of necklace. "Old Bear says every pattern tells a story. I'm trying to tell ours." "And what story do these beads tell?" She held up the strand, letting it catch the first light of dawn. "The white shells are my people's medicine, clean lines, ordered knowledge. The turquoise is yours, deeper wisdom, earth-rooted strength. But together," she let the beads fall through her fingers. "Together they make something new, something stronger." Silent Wind's hand covered hers, warm and sure, the touch sent. Awareness shivering through her like wind through summer grass. "Like us," he said simply. "Like us," she echoed, meeting his eyes. The morning sun painted the mountains gold, but neither of them moved. In the distance, a meadowlark began its song, clear notes rising into the dawn silence. "My people have a saying," Silent Wind said finally. "When two rivers join, you cannot separate their waters again. They flow as one to the sea." Sarah thought of her grandmother's pendant, how it sang in harmony with his crystal. "Maria told me once that the greatest medicine comes from love. I didn't understand then. And now?" She turned her hand in his, their fingers intertwining. "Now I understand that love itself is medicine. It heals the wounds we cannot see, bridges the gaps we think cannot be crossed." Silent Wind touched the beaded necklace with his free hand. "There will be those who say this cannot be, that we are too different. There will always be those who fear what they don't understand." Sarah's voice was firm. "But understanding grows like a seed in good soil. We've seen it already. In the children who come to both of us for healing, in the mothers who ask me to learn their medicine songs, in the warriors who watch you read my father's medical books." He smiled, a rare, full smile that transformed his serious face. "Old Bear says we were chosen by the spirits for this path, that our love will help heal not just bodies, but the breach between our peoples. A heavy destiny," Sarah said softly, "but not a lonely one." Silent Wind reached into his medicine pouch and withdrew something that caught the morning light like captured fire. A necklace of his own making, turquoise and white shells, but also silver that he had shaped himself, and a single perfect crystal that sang to her grandmother's pendant. "In my tribe," he said, "when a medicine man chooses his life partner, he makes a necklace that tells their story, not just what is, but what will be." He held it out to her. "I see our story stretching far beyond these mountains, beyond these troubles. I see children who will carry both medicines in their blood, and grandchildren who will not remember there was ever a divide to bridge." Sarah touched the necklace, feeling its power resonate with her pendant. "It's beautiful," she whispered. "Like hope," he said, and gently placed it around her neck. The sun crested the mountains fully now, turning the desert to gold. In the camp below, people were stirring, beginning their day. Soon, they would need to face the challenges still before them. The approaching townsmen, the fears and prejudices, on both sides. But for now, in this sacred hour between night and day, they sat together, letting love do its quiet work of healing. The eagle feather in Old Bear's hand caught the afternoon light as he held it high, a symbol of truth that even the townsmen would recognize. Below the medicine lodge, two groups faced each other with hands near weapons. Sheriff Wilson's posse and Dr. Morris on one side, Apache warriors led by Silent Wind on the other. Between them lay a young cavalry scout, writhing in the agony of a rattlesnake bite. His fellow soldiers had carried him up the mountain, desperate enough to seek help from those they had come to confront. "Your medicine failed him," Dr. Morris snapped at the soldier who had tried to cut and suck the venom. "And now you bring him to savages?" "We bring him to Sarah Mitchell," the soldier corrected, his voice firm. "We've heard what she can do." Sarah knelt beside the injured man, her mind already cataloguing symptoms: swollen limb, rapid pulse, the distinctive fang marks above his ankle. She wore both her grandmother's pendant and Silent Wind's beaded necklace, their power humming together like distant thunder. "Silent Wind," she called, not taking her eyes from her patient. "I need the rattlesnake medicine." He moved to her side, ignoring the way the townsmen's hands tightened on their weapons. From his medicine pouch, he drew out a small leather bag of sacred herbs, plants that his people had used against snake venom since before the Spanish came. "This is nonsense," Dr. Morris protested. "He needs proper medical treatment." "He needs both," Sarah cut him off, her voice carrying the authority of two traditions. "Your cutting and bleeding removes some venom, yes, but without the medicine that counteracts what remains, he'll die before you can get him down the mountain." The scout's fellow soldiers shifted uneasily, looking between Morris and Sarah. The wounded man's breathing was becoming labored. Silent Wind began to chant softly, burning a small amount of sage as Sarah mixed the anti-venom herbs with clean water. Old Bear watched, still holding the eagle feather, its presence commanding truth from all who spoke beneath it. "I'll not stand by and watch this witchcraft," Morris blustered, but Sheriff Wilson caught his arm. "Let her work, Doctor," the sheriff said quietly. "I've seen enough death for one season." Sarah worked with sure hands, combining Silent Wind's medicine with techniques she'd learned from her father. She cut carefully around the bite, but instead of trying to bleed it dry, she packed the wound with herbs that would draw the venom out slowly while supporting the body's own healing. "Watch," Silent Wind told the gathered crowd, his voice carrying unexpected power. "This is not witchcraft. This is knowledge earned through generations of learning the desert's ways. Knowledge your medicine woman has proven worthy to share." The scout's breathing eased as Sarah wrapped the wound in clean bandages soaked in the herbal solution. Color began returning to his face. "Impossible," Morris whispered, but there was a crack in his certainty. An older Apache woman stepped forward, speaking in her own language. "Silent Wind," translated. "She says her grandson had a bite like this last season. The old ways alone did not save him. The white medicine alone did not save him. But together—" He gestured to the recovering scout. Sarah stood, facing both groups. "This is what I tried to tell you in town. There is no conflict between medicines except what we create through fear. Your cutting technique, Dr. Morris, it has merit, but combined with these herbs, with the proper ceremonies, it works better than either alone." "Ceremonies," Morris scoffed but uncertainly. "Prayer and superstition." "Hope," Sarah corrected. "Faith in healing. The power of belief to strengthen a body's own medicine. You've seen it yourself, Doctor, when patients who believe they'll recover do better than those who lose hope." The scout sat up with help from his companions, touching his bandaged leg with wonder. "The pain, it's easing." Old Bear lowered the eagle feather at last, speaking in careful English. "Many trails lead up the mountain. A wise traveler does not claim his path is the only true one." Sheriff Wilson stepped forward, his hat in his hands. "Miss Sarah, what you did here today—" He paused, choosing his words carefully. "The town council might be persuaded to reconsider certain matters if you were willing to share your knowledge, properly, legally." "Share it?" Dr. Morris protested. "Sheriff, you can't mean—" "I mean, I've watched too many good people die because we're too proud to learn from those who know these lands better than we do." The sheriff's eyes were steady. "And I mean I'd rather have a live daughter who believes in two kinds of medicine than a dead one who only believed in one." Silent Wind moved to Sarah's side, his presence both protection and partnership. "Knowledge shared breeds understanding," he said. "Understanding breeds peace." The wounded scout's commander stepped into the space between the groups. "My men will testify to what we've seen here. The army might be interested in learning these combined techniques." Sarah felt the power of the moment, a pivot point where the future balanced on the edge of a blade. She touched both her pendant and Silent Wind's necklace, feeling their resonance with the truth of this moment. "Then let us teach each other," she said clearly. "Let us build a bridge where there has been only walls." The peace pipe passed from hand to hand in the failing light of day, each person who held it bound by ancient custom to speak only truth. They sat in a circle outside the medicine lodge, tribal elders, town council members, army officers, and healers from both worlds. At its center burned a fire of sacred woods, its smoke carrying prayers skyward. Sarah watched the pipe travel, noting how even Dr. Morris's hands trembled slightly as he accepted it. The past week had brought changes none of them could have predicted. The snake-bitten scout had recovered fully, walking the streets of Copper Creek as living proof of what combined medicines could achieve. "We offer this ground," Old Bear said, gesturing to a stretch of land where the mountains met the valley. "Neutral territory, where both peoples may come for healing." The town mayor, a man who had once voted for Sarah's hanging, cleared his throat. "The town council has discussed this. We're prepared to recognize Miss Mitchell and any others she trains as legitimate healers, provided proper documentation is kept." Silent Wind spoke next, his voice carrying the weight of his people's trust. "Documentation we can agree to, but the sacred ceremonies, the spiritual medicines, these must be respected, not regulated. Surely you don't expect us to embrace superstition," Dr. Morris began, but Sarah interrupted gently. "Not superstition, Doctor, psychology. You've read the new papers from Europe about the mind's influence on healing? The ceremonies serve the same purpose as your clean white coat and confident manner. They help people believe in their own recovery." Morris blinked, momentarily struck by this scientific framing of spiritual practice. The army captain nodded, thoughtfully adding, "We've seen similar effects in field hospitals. Soldiers who maintain hope, who believe in their treatment, often survive wounds that should have been fatal." The pipe continued its circle as the sun sank toward the horizon. Each person who spoke added another thread to the web of understanding, being woven between the cultures. Sarah felt Silent Wind's quiet pride beside her, saw Old Bear's subtle nod of approval. A young Apache mother rose, her recovered child in her arms. In halting English, she told of how Sarah had combined willow bark with traditional ceremonies to break her son's fever. One of the town council women followed, describing how Silent Wind's snake-bite poultice had saved her grandson when conventional medicine had failed. "But how do we preserve this knowledge?" the mayor asked. "How do we ensure it's not lost or corrupted?" Sarah reached for her partially burned medicine book, restored now with new pages of combined wisdom. "We write it down, yes, but we also teach it person to person, heart to heart. Each medicine has its keepers, its teachers. We respect both ways of passing knowledge." Silent Wind untied his medicine pouch, revealing the crystal that still sang. To Sarah's pendant. "Some wisdom lives in books, some in ceremony, some in the land itself. A good healer learns to read all these languages." The army captain leaned forward, his face earnest in the firelight. "The fort would support this. We lose too many men to fever and snakebite, too many scouts to diseases these people know how to cure. If you can train healers in both traditions." "We can," Sarah said firmly, "but it must be done with respect. No more talk of savages or superstition, no more dismissing generations of wisdom because it comes in a different language than we expect." The pipe completed its circle, returning to Old Bear. He held it up, letting the last light catch its carved surface. "When I was young," he said in English carefully learned over the past week, "I thought wisdom was like a stick, rigid, unchanging. Now I see it is like this smoke, able to take new shapes while staying true to its nature." One by one, they added their marks to the peace agreement, signatures for the townspeople, traditional symbols for the Apache, official seals for the army. Sarah and Silent Wind signed both ways, bridging the gap as they had been chosen to do. As twilight deepened toward night, Sarah looked up to see an eagle circling overhead, perhaps the same one they had healed, still watching over their progress. The bird's cry echoed off the canyon walls, sounding remarkably like triumph. At dawn, Sarah stood with Silent Wind before the two-path stone. A massive boulder split naturally down its center, creating a fork in the ancient trail. One path led toward the town, the other toward the Apache winter camps. The stone's weathered surface bore the marks of countless generations who had paused here to contemplate their direction. "Old Bear says we must choose," Silent Wind said, softly, his hand warm in hers. "The peace holds, but our people still live apart. We cannot walk both paths forever." Sarah touched her grandmother's pendant, which now hung beside Silent Wind's crystal on a single cord. "When I was young, my father told me that the hardest choices are the ones that shape not just our lives, but the lives of others." The rising sun painted the stone in shades of amber and rose, highlighting the petroglyphs carved by ancient hands, symbols of journeys, choices, destinies. A fresh marking had been added recently, 2 spirals joining to form a single pattern. "The tribe would welcome you fully," Silent Wind said. "You've earned their trust, learned their ways. The children already call you Medicine Woman in our tongue. And the town council has offered to build us a proper clinic," Sarah added. "A place where both medicines could be practiced openly, where both peoples could come for healing." They sat beside the stone, sharing the morning meal of bread and dried meat. Below them, the desert. Awakened, lizards emerging to warm themselves, early birds calling their territories, the first hints of day's heat rising from the rocks. "Perhaps," Silent Wind said slowly, "the choice is not which path to take, but how to make a new one." Sarah looked at him questioningly. "The Apache have always known that the strongest paths are those that follow the land's own wisdom. See how water flows around obstacles, creating new channels." He gestured to a dry stream bed below. "Perhaps we are meant to be like water." Understanding dawned in Sarah's eyes, not choosing between worlds, but flowing between them, creating something new. Silent Wind nodded. "The peace agreement speaks of neutral ground. Why not build there? Not just a clinic, but a place of learning where both medicines can grow stronger together." Sarah stood, excitement building. "We could teach others what we've learned, not just healing techniques, but how to bridge the gap between worlds." She walked to the fork in the path, seeing it with new eyes. "The army captain said they'd support a proper medical station, and Old Bear spoke of teaching the young ones both ways." "It would not be easy," Silent Wind cautioned. "Some would still resist. Change comes slowly to both our peoples." "But it does come," Sarah said firmly. "Look how far we've traveled already, from the day you cut me down from those gallows." Who would have believed then that Apache elders would sit in peace with town council members, that Dr. Morris would admit there might be wisdom in ceremony? Silent Wind rose, joining her at the path's fork. "Then we make our choice by refusing. To choose, by building something new between the old ways." "Not between," Sarah corrected gently. "Above, like that eagle we healed, seeing both territories as one landscape, both peoples as one family in need of healing." They stood together as the sun climbed higher, casting their shadow across the ancient stone, the marking of joined. Spirals seemed to shift in the changing light, becoming something more, a map perhaps, or a promise. "Old Bear will understand," Silent Wind said with certainty. "He saw this possibility in his visions, I think. Why else would he give me that crystal that sings to your pendant?" Sarah squeezed his hand. "And the town council wants peace badly enough to try something new, especially after seeing how many lives we can save together." A hawk circled overhead, its cry carrying clearly in the morning air. Both of them recognized it as a sign of approval. Nature itself witnessing their choice to forge a new path. "Then let us begin," Silent Wind said, his voice carrying the quiet authority of certainty. "Not as people of one world or the other, but as healers who see the truth, that all medicine serves the same great spirit, whether we call it God or Creator, or simply the wisdom of life itself." Together they walked away from the two-path stone, neither toward town nor tribe, but toward the neutral ground where their shared future waited to be born. Behind them, their shadows merged into one on the ancient rock, adding their story to the countless tales of transformation carved in its weathered face. The unity cloak hung in the entrance of the new healing lodge, its intricate design combining Apache patterns with European medical symbols, Autumn sunlight streamed through the windows, illuminating the main room where Sarah and Silent Wind worked together, teaching a mixed group of students, Apache youth, town children, and 2 army medics. The willow bark must be gathered at first light, Sarah explained, holding up a bundle of dried branches. But before you harvest, you must understand what Silent Wind will show you. Silent Wind stepped forward, burning a small bundle of sage. The medicine is not just in the bark, he said in the clear English he'd mastered over the past months. It is in the respect we show when gathering, in the prayers that thank the tree for its gift, in the understanding that all healing comes from the earth itself. Dr. Morris sat at the back of the room, taking careful notes. His initial skepticism had gradually given way to cautious interest, especially after Sarah had shown him how. Traditional ceremonies improved his patients' recovery rates. Now he came regularly to learn, his medical bag gradually filling with both conventional medicines and sacred herbs. Through the window, Sarah could see the new gardens where they grew healing plants from both traditions. Apache women worked alongside town wives, sharing knowledge of seasons and soil, of which plants grew better in sun or shade. Children played nearby, switching easily between English and Apache words, unconscious of the boundaries their parents were still learning to cross. Remember, Sarah continued, moving among the students, each medicine has its place. Sometimes the body needs physical healing. She held up her father's surgical tools, kept bright and clean. Sometimes the spirit needs ceremonial healing. She gestured to the sacred items on Silent Wind's medicine shelf. A true healer learns to see which is needed, or how they might work together. A commotion outside drew their attention. A rider approached at speed, one of the Apache scouts who patrolled the boundaries of the neutral territory. But instead of bringing news of trouble, he carried something else, a letter. Silent Wind read it first, his face breaking into a rare smile. The Army Medical Corps has approved our proposal. They will send more students and supplies and... He paused, looking at Sarah. They want us to document our methods for other territories. Sarah felt the weight of the moment. What had begun as a desperate escape from the gallows had grown into something far larger, a true bridge between worlds that others might follow. The afternoon sun caught her grandmother's pendant and Silent Wind's crystal, now permanently wrapped together in a single setting that hung above the main treatment area. Their combined light fell across the unity cloak, making its patterns seem to dance. Old Bear, who had been dozing by the fire, opened his eyes. I see others coming, he said in the voice he used for visions, not just from the fort or the town or the tribe, from far places, drawn by the story of 2 medicines becoming one. Let them come, Sarah said softly. There's room enough for all wisdom here. Their students had gathered around the unity cloak, young fingers tracing its patterns as they discussed the day's lessons. Sarah watched them with quiet joy, Apache children explaining European anatomy to their white friends, town children demonstrating sacred herb bundling techniques to their tribal classmates. Silent Wind moved to her side, his presence as steady as the mountains themselves. Do you ever regret, he asked quietly, the choice we made? Sarah thought of her old life in town, of the gallows that had nearly ended her journey, of the desperate flight through desert canyons. She thought of all that had grown from those dark moments, not just their love, but this place of healing and hope. How can I regret choosing a wider path? She answered. Look at them. She nodded toward their students. They don't see 2 medicines anymore. They see one healing, flowing through many channels. The afternoon light softened toward evening. Soon the day's last patients would arrive, townspeople and tribal members alike, coming to this neutral ground where all healing was honored, all wisdom respected. Here, under the combined light of crystal and pendant, watched over by the unity cloak that told their story in thread and symbol, a new way of living was taking root. Not just survival, but transformation, not just peace but understanding. a future neither people could have imagined alone, growing stronger with each child who learned both ways, each patient who experienced the power of combined healing, each small step toward a world where wisdom knew no boundaries. 1 year later, spring painted the desert in unexpected colors. Wildflowers dotted the neutral ground between town and tribal lands, and in the center, the healing lodge had grown. New buildings had sprouted around the original structure, including a dormitory, for students who traveled from distant territories to learn the combined medicines. Inside the nursery, Sarah placed her newborn daughter in the cradle board Silent Wind had carved. Its surface told their story in traditional symbols, but the padding inside was soft white cotton from the town's dry goods store. The baby's dark eyes watched the light play across her grandmother's pendant and her father's crystal, still hanging together above the main treatment area. "She's born to both worlds," Old Bear said, coming to stand beside them. "The first of many who will not know the boundaries we once built so high." Silent Wind touched the cradleboard's carvings. "We will teach her both ways." "All ways," Sarah corrected gently. "Look." Through the window, they could see Dr. Morris teaching a group of Apache healers how to use his microscope, while nearby, tribal elders instructed army medics in the preparation of sacred herbs. The gardens had expanded, now including medicines from as far away as Spanish California and the Navajo territories. The door opened, bringing the scent of desert sage. A young Apache woman entered with her white friend from town, both wearing the apprentice healer's sash that marked them as advanced students. "The supply wagon arrived from the fort," the Apache woman reported, "and riders came with word that 2 more tribes want to send healers to learn." Sarah smiled, remembering her own journey from fear to understanding. "Tell them there is always room for more knowledge here." The townspeople still sometimes called it Mitchell's Clinic. The Apache named it the place of 2 medicines. The army referred to it officially as the Territorial Medical Station. But to those who lived and worked and healed there, it had become simply the bridge, a place where all paths met and wisdom flowed freely. Sarah's daughter stirred in her cradleboard, reaching toward the light that danced between crystal and pendant. Outside, the afternoon sun gilded the desert, turning the neutral ground to gold. Students gathered for the evening meal, their voices rising in both English and Apache, sharing stories and medicines and dreams. Silent Wind wrapped his arm around Sarah's waist. "Do you remember what you said that day at the 2 Paths Stone, about seeing the land as the eagle does?" Sarah nodded, watching their daughter drift toward sleep. "One territory, one family, one healing. Look how far that vision has flown." Through the open door came the sound of singing, healing songs that mixed Apache words with European melodies, creating something new and powerful. The unity cloak stirred in the evening breeze, its patterns a reminder of how separate threads could weave together into something stronger than either alone. Old Bear's voice carried the weight of prophecy. "This is just the beginning. Your daughter's children will heal in ways we cannot imagine, carrying medicines from all peoples in their hands and hearts." Sarah touched the cradle board, feeling the smooth wood beneath her fingers. She thought of that desperate dawn at the gallows, of the rope that had nearly ended her journey. That same rope, now woven with threads of many colors, hung preserved in the teaching lodge, a reminder that death sometimes led to rebirth, that endings could become beginnings, that love and courage could transform even the darkest moments into light. "Sleep well, little one," she whispered to her daughter. "Dream of a world where all healing is honored, all wisdom respected, all paths lead home." The evening star rose above the desert as shadows lengthened across the neutral ground. In the growing dusk, the boundaries between town and tribal land, between old ways and new, between what had been and what could be, faded into the promise of tomorrow's dawn.